Today is a special episode. We have a guest with us today. So Charles D. Hatley Esquire, he's the CEO of Melone Hatley PC, where he combines visionary leadership with entrepreneurial drive to shape the firm's growth strategy and culture. Recognized for building high-performing teams and fostering innovation, Charles is committed to creating a workplace where collaboration, professional development, and accountability drive both employee success and client satisfaction. A strategic leader with extensive experience across multiple industries, Charles has a proven record of scaling operations, enhancing efficiency, and implementing forward-thinking strategies that deliver sustainable growth. He believes that leadership is not just about guiding a firm, it's about inspiring people, empowering teams, and building a culture where talent thrives and ideas flourish. Before leading Melone Hatley, Charles managed offices for a national law firm, litigating high-stakes family law cases across Virginia and Washington, D.C. Today, he merges that big law expertise with an entrepreneurial boutique approach, ensuring clients receive practical, strategic, and compassionate guidance while feeling supported throughout challenging legal processes. Under his leadership, the firm has evolved into a client-centered, innovative practice where people, both employees and clients, feel empowered, supported, and motivated to succeed. Beyond his leadership role, Charles shares his expertise as the host of the firm's own podcast called I Now Pronounce You Divorced, where he explores key topics in divorce, child custody, and co-parenting. By providing practical guidance and thoughtful analysis, Charles helps families navigate complex legal issues while fostering informed, confident decisions. And we'll include a link in the show notes so that you can jump over and listen to Charles's podcast.
Welcome to your Profitable Law Firm podcast. I'm Kelley Brubaker, your dedicated host, passionate about empowering law firm owners. Let's dive into the hidden strategies that lead to overflowing profits, scaled growth, and thriving lives. And this is where overwhelm transforms into confidence, enabling you to create and enjoy your dream firm and your dream life.
So, Charles, I'm so excited that you're here today.
And thank you for having me. I'm super excited to talk to you. And anytime somebody wants to talk about innovation and leadership, I always enjoy it.
I am just so excited. I mean, everything that I just read through your intro, I mean, these are all things that really hit at my heart. Even though I'm a CPA, my niche is supporting law firms. And I just love having those conversations about what can be different, and different is good. Different is, and I just love the, empowering teams, your teams and clients. Like, it's a win-win-win. Like, if you can have synergy, right? So I just love what we are going to talk about today.
Yeah. And, empowering is such a funny word because sometimes that means I don't have to do it anymore.
That's a great viewpoint. Love that. So let's jump in. We're going to talk about a couple different things today, but we wanted to start off with talking about law firm CEOs and how you can modernize culture and structure and operations. And what I love about that is the way we phrase that topic, because I talk to a lot of firm owners who don't necessarily look at themselves as a business owner, let alone don't consider themselves a CEO. And by all rights, to be the owner of a firm, I don't care what size your firm is. If you're the firm owner, you are the CEO. And so that little mind shift can be such a powerful thing. So let's start off with, when you look at firms that are trying to modernize, are there signs that tell you that the culture or the structure has started to work against the firm instead of supporting it?
Usually, like you said, a lot of law firm owners are reluctant to call themselves CEOs because there's this weird idea in law that it's a managing partner who still continues to practice, who then passes cases to a junior partner or a senior partner, then passes the cases to an associate and then on down. So they have not brought in a modernized feel to the services that are actually providing them. And what you'll see across the culture in that particular instance is you'll see your team members start craving a different structure, but somebody who is almost driving themselves to obsolescence because they're so stuck in this old way of doing things. They're never going to let their team members grow to something new. And unfortunately, because of all of the access we have online now, everybody gets to see the really polished, pretty version through social media of how things work on the other side. And you'll not resentment so much, but people start feeling they're stifled, even though this is the way that it's always been done.
Right. And that's the thing. Yeah. And I was laughing as you're like, yeah, the managing partner that's 93 years old that still needs to be in the office every day.
Mhm.
I've seen it. Oh, yeah. And I agree. Like, and it's funny because I'll get DMs on LinkedIn from staff, from attorneys and paralegals who are like, I'm stuck in this firm and I love the people, but I can't stand the work I do, or it's the expectations or the idea that I can't do something because I'm only a paralegal or I'm not the managing partner, and that makes me really sad. And I can't do much about it in my position, but it does make me sad that people are out there. I think there's a lot of law firms that um, they probably have a better team than they think they do if they just kind of gave a little bit of a chance, right?
Absolutely. And kind of what you're saying is we are at a point where people in their careers kind of want to see the bigger picture. And you have people that are stuck in such a myopic point of view to where I need you to do piece A, B, and C. You never get to see the completed alphabet of everything I put together. And it's just not working for people anymore.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I was on a webinar. I was a guest on a webinar last week, and that was one of the things we talked about. And I can't remember how the question was asked of me, but I essentially said, you know, I think it would be helpful, especially if you're a really small firm, but even no matter what your size is take your key numbers for your office, whatever they are, whatever your key metrics that your firm focuses on. You don't have to share all of them with your staff, but if you would share, like with your intake team, if you would share with them how many number of leads coming in, and then how many do those turn into appointments, and how many show up and how many get closed, and kind of teach them what their role is to support that. And I call that intake because that's always like a hot topic in law firms, but you could do that with every department in your firm. And, a couple of the questions in the chat were like, what? Share information? And I'm like, well, share what you're comfortable sharing. But the more you share, employees, if they've always been an employee, they absolutely do not see a firm the same way you do. And some of them don't understand that for them to do their job, they do it really well, brings in more money to the firm. It means you can still pay them next week. So, like, some just don't think through it that way because it's not their viewpoint. So it is interesting, but I would love to be able to encourage more firms to start sharing information. I'm not saying you open up the bank balance or, here's my profit and loss statement. I'm not saying all that, but just sharing key things, just little numbers that kind of help,
Mhm.
help staff better understand what they do. So what's let's talk about culture shift. What is a culture shift that you've implemented that produced a measurable and meaningful operational improvement? Because I think this is going to be something really good.
Well, not to piggyback off what you just said, but it was tearing down the mindset that I had to control every single number in my head and tell somebody, look, let's talk about reception or intake. I need you to answer the phone. Well, why do I need to answer the phone? How many phone calls do I need to answer? And so it was another eye-opening moment to realize if I didn't tell them, like you said with the numbers, if I didn't tell them the numbers, they made them up. They made up the numbers that would need to be done. So it became, I'm a practitioner of laziness. Whatever's the easiest way is sometimes the easiest way rather than combating rumors is just to tell people what we need. So we set KPIs with our reception team. And it was like, well, one of your KPIs is to accurately route calls. It's not just picking up the phone, it's how many times you get the call to the right person so that the client doesn't have to be transferred more than from you to the next person. And that was a metric that not a lot of people looked at. And so we did a quick exercise. I just randomly picked 5 professional services and we called them. And there was nothing, I didn't know what was going to happen. I just randomly picked 5 professional services just called them and I said, "Hey, I've got such and such complaint." And I would get put on hold, then I would get transferred, and then I put on hold, then I would get transferred. And I was like, "How did that make you feel?" And they're like, "I don't feel like you got any help." Like, see? So sharing that with everybody and the why behind it. So my way of calling the other professional services was to show the why of the customer experience, what happens. And then even weirder was to show the why of the employee experience of how the next team member who was now dealing with a client who had been transferred around and who called in maybe a little bit irritated, but now who was super upset. It made an instant impact to slowing down, and we took away the KPI of how quickly they had to transfer calls, but slowing down and asking one more question to make sure we got the person to the right place, and our client complaints went down, and the people answering the phone was a weirder impact. People didn't ignore calls as much because it was less likely to be an angry person on the other end.
So I want to point out what you said about you took away the KPI about how fast
Mhm.
to answer and transfer the call. Because so I will often talk to law firm owners that they either track no KPIs or they track every single KPI under the sun. And a big question I will get is it for the people who don't track KPIs, they're like, nope, too overwhelming. There's 10,000 KPIs. And I'm like, nope, I get that. But do you realize that half of them are the inverse of the other half? So we can eliminate half. And then some of them, maybe trying to measure something that's not important to you. And then the ones who are tracking all 10,000 KPIs, I'm like, well, time out. You've got a person full time. That's all they're doing is trying to gather like all this data. And that's not always helpful either. But so where I come in, I try to meet in the middle and say, well, let's figure out what your goals are for your firm. And so I love that you pointed out that you just like nix the KPI because it's getting the wrong incentive. I mean, that to me is a huge thing. But I will tell you, I started my career in Big Four, and we had this receptionist who had been the receptionist for like 30 years. And the days that either the week she was on vacation each year or the days she was out sick, the other admin in the office would have to rotate the front desk for the phones. And this is back, mid 90s, late 90s. And so everybody had to call the one number and then she would route you to the places. When she was out, we would get the angriest email or voicemails from clients. I don't know. I just called, I got hung up on, I was transferred to somebody who's not you.
Mhm.
So it makes a huge difference. And you're right, it's nicer when you can pick up the phone call and it's going to be, 9 times out of 10, it's going to be a happier call than somebody who's already angry because they've been routed to the wrong people. Like I feel bad when I have to call the IRS and I'm like, please just route me to the right person.
There's no chance.
Through and there's no chance because it's all through the IVR through a computer system. So yeah, the chances are low, but I am happier when I get routed on the first try. So so I love that example. I think that's really great. So we started off talking about the viewpoint of traditional the elderly, older, experienced managing partner and kind of how they do their things. And so I think we both probably agree that traditional hierarchies really slow down things a lot in law firms. So what are modern changes that you see law firm CEOs resisting to change the most and why?
I've seen it almost go the other way. A lot of people talk about the flattening of the curve. They want to flatten the management curve so much so that it doesn't exist. And for a technology company that's selling software, you might be able to have one manager over a bunch of software developers. But in professional services, I think what needs to happen is they almost need to come back a little bit to making sure that there's team leads over every department that is going to be looking at the KPIs. So, a modernization of almost bringing back an old idea with the modern twist of having your team leads be your KPI champions with the team members so that the team members, they can report their own KPIs. And you're using your team lead to be a champion for those KPIs and almost a coach for them hitting whatever, weekly, quarterly, monthly, quarterly, or yearly goal they may have. So not flattening the curve so much that it doesn't make sense anymore, but it's also turning your mid-level managers into coaches, not micromanagers, is what I've seen.
Oh yeah, and I love that actually. Yeah, because I see what I love about a smaller firm is we're quick, we're nimble. You have a problem, you find a solution, you can run with it. You don't have to go through 5 different managers to get to the ultimate decision maker. So I love that approach. I love being able to say, hey, this is a department, however you decide what your department is, right? And then here's going to be the person. And it's not necessarily the boss of that department, but it just at least a person who can be the coach, be the cheerleader, help people when they have a problem, figure out what the solution is, give them some power, right, to be able to make certain decisions. Which of course there's probably a back and forth with how much is too much decision making that they can enjoy. But no, I really like that because I mean, I see things different being a financial person, and I have a lot of clients that are remote. And so years ago, I mean, I've had my accounting firm 20 years, and the first like 15 years, everybody was local to me. So I was in the firms because I would travel between my different client locations. And so I could see things so much differently being in person in an office. And then, now being remote, I still see things, and certain staff message me on different things for different reasons, but I don't see as much anymore. So I really like that, that approach to be able to create little groups of people and make them held accountable for whatever metrics that they, are being, I don't want to say graded on, but are responsible for. So I like that. So how would you help a founder take a step back? Because I admittedly, I struggle with this, from being the bottleneck without losing quality or standards that you've built the firm on. Because I know for me, I feel like I'm always 2 steps, I take 2 steps forward and then take 1 step back. And, so what steps would you recommend to a CEO of a law firm, like to stop being the bottleneck in all the decisions?
I thought about that, and the first thing I came up with is nobody actually cares about you more than you care about yourself. So, everybody's worried about what other people think about them. At the end of the day, people are probably going to forget, everybody's going to forget your name, right? There's very few names that we remember after 50 years after somebody passes away. So don't worry about it. Nobody's going to remember you anyway. Uh, but the second part is, if you think that you can do it the best, you've already failed. I promise you, in every single thing that you undertake, there's somebody out there that can do it better. And if you'll get out of the way, you'll probably let that person do it better. Yeah. I was talking to a gentleman the other day that installs very high end home automation stuff, kind of where you walk in the house and all your blinds go up, your movie theater turns on and things like that.
Right.
And he was like, I can't imagine ever growing my business and getting out of this role. And I said, don't worry, then you'll never grow your business.
True.
And
Very true.
he's, hey, he sat there, looked at me, and I was like, you said the first part was true. You can't imagine it. Neither can anybody else in the world. So if you really, if you think about, and what I told him, if you wanted to help the most people possible get their home set up in this fashion, then you have to have your ego in check so much that you realize that your best and highest use is to move beyond the installation, beyond the customer contact, and let somebody else take over this role. You'll be able to help out so many more people. Will there be mistakes? Of course. Will everybody do it the same way that you would? No. Is that okay? It's probably better.
Right. And that's the crazy part. And I have this whole internal dialogue with myself that I'll go to delegate something to somebody on my team. And then I'm like, "Oh, like, are they going to do it as good?" But it's actually crazy when you let go that now, and not all the time, but there will be people that will surprise you. They'll step up and say, why are we doing it this way? Because if we did it this way, it would be faster. I'm like, oh, I didn't know. So yeah, so it is crazy. Now, obviously that's not going to happen all the time, and you're going to have failure at some point, but you need to be able to react to it, learn from it, and then move on. Like, so if you need to change your process a little bit to prevent the failure from happening again, then so be it. But but it's a teaching moment, and then you learn and you change things and you improve them and you move on. So yeah, it's crazy when you give them a chance and they actually surprise you. So I do like that. So I know we kind of both jumped on intake, and this might be the answer, but if you're talking to another firm owner, what's the first operational process that you believe every firm should modernize if they want to scale?
Themselves, the firm owner themselves, intake. I think my 2 cents on in the world, I think a lot of business owners are going down a trap with this AI intake stuff where you're going to have computers answer it because the people that are going to lap you are going to be the ones that use real people. And, that's what clients are going to want. So, I think as we look at what needs to be modernized, when we started our business, one idea was I couldn't care less what a law firm did in town. I came and named 5 law firms that exist in any town that we're in because I said, well, what do I ultimately want to provide my clients? I want my clients to leave with the feeling of what occurred, right? I can do law all day long, but if I do law perfectly, my clients feel like I did it poorly, then I didn't do a good job. And so I said, what else provides a great feeling, but a basic principle? Hotels, right? They provide you a roof over your head and a place to sleep, but you feel a little bit different when you go to the Ritz-Carlton versus, some other motel. And so there's this book called The New Gold Standard, which discusses the Ritz-Carlton. And I said, that's how I want to model my business. And I've never looked back at another law firm and said, man, I would like to do it like another law firm. I've always looked at like, how does the Ritz-Carlton do it? How do they create this feeling where people will go pay $7,000 a night to sleep on a bed?
Right. And I like that. So I don't use the hotel, an analogy, but I will often, if I see a client that if they're billing hourly or even flat rate, like not contingent, so anything not contingent, because that's a whole other ball field, but a whole other ball game. But I will often say, well, what I feel like your rates are low. Like, where did you come up with your rates? Well, the firm across the street, this is what they bill. And then, we price shopped. We found our competitors, the top 5 firms in town, and this is what they price. And so we're just kind of in the middle of all those. And I'm like, okay, not a great answer. But I will tell forget about the other people. It doesn't matter. But I come at it from a completely different angle. But I do like that analogy even better. Like your analogy of the Ritz-Carlton. I do like that. So that's pretty good. I like that.
It doesn't work for showing up to trade shows though. When you show up to a bar function and people are like, oh, you're one of my competitors. And you're like, I don't know who you are.
I don't know.
I'm not trying to be stuck up. I just don't honestly know who you are because I don't look.
Right. Yeah. I have found that I have changed, like from my perspective, there's other accounting firms that serve the legal space exclusively, or majority of their clients are law firms. And I run into them at different things. And I had a speaking engagement in person in September, and I ran into somebody that I'm like, oh, your name kind of is familiar, but I'm not really sure how I know you. And it's somebody I follow on LinkedIn. Like, it all clicked at some point. I was like, oh, I know how I know you, but I'm not following her. Like, we just had some things in common that we talked about. And so, yeah, so it's kind of a weird to run into other people who are competitors. So I do agree with that. So what are most common assumptions that law firm CEOs make about their team that turn out to be incorrect when they modernize their processes?
That's a hard one. And, fortunately, some of these questions before, and I read that one, I was like, man, that's hard because a lot of law firm owners, like you said, are more experienced. So they've been doing it for more years. They came up, they're willing to put their nose to the grindstone, build like 2,080, 2,200 hours a year. The reality of the landscape is there's more than 100 law firms. Like you talked about working at the big 4, since then, there's a lot of accounting firms that have popped up. There's a lot of opportunities. There's a lot of different places people can go. And not everybody's motivated by the all powerful dollar anymore. We have people that will bill thousands of hours a year and be motivated by the dollar. Great. We have other people that they just want to know. I mean, literally, you'll come in and what days off do I get? Not the best first day question, but I get it. Like, I've got a life outside of here. Like, what else can I do? And I think a lot of law firm owners really miss the idea of how to do math and calculate, like you said, use an hourly rate, understand what you can pay your team members, understand the costs that are associated with that team members, like, the multiplier times the salary, right? To get your payroll taxes, all your benefits, things like that. And understand what multiplier you need to use in order to continue to run your organization at whatever percentages you want to run it at. And
Right.
work backwards from there. You don't have to have everybody billing 2,000 hours a year in order to do that math.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, and I've had clients where one attorney is a rainmaker. They know how to network. They're amazing. They know all these people. They've just done really good with connecting, and they're getting all these leads coming in, but they're spending so much time with their networking, they can't do all the work. But you have to have the flip, like you have to have the yin and yang, right? You've got to have the other person who's going to be the grunt that's going to do the work. And they both may be attorneys, associates within your firm on the same, what you consider to be the same level, but but everybody has their strengths and weaknesses. And when you can match, the person that's the rainmaker bringing in all the work with someone who can do all the work, then that's huge. And so now you just divide up what their goals are, because the rainmaker is not going to have the billable hour goal. They're going to fail at that but you have to give them the incentive to go and bring in more work. And then you've got the person who, if you judge them by, how much work they bring in, they're screwed because they're busy doing the work. They don't have time to go to the bar events and, all those different things. So yeah, so it's definitely, it's something that you've got to kind of, I talk to firm owners who are like, I want to set a bonus program for everybody. And I'm like, well, you have 20 people that work for you. Unfortunately, you can't have one, or at least in my best professional guidance, you can't have one bonus criteria, because you're never going to be able, like, somebody's going to fail and somebody's going to be ecstatic. And you don't want the person who fails. They serve a purpose in your firm. So don't piss them off. So we probably need to come into buckets and have different goals for different people. So yeah, so there's, definitely lots of conversations around that for sure. So let's change topics. So we've been talking about CEO mindset and how to run your firm and scale, but let's talk about lessons from scaling a legal firm, a law firm, while preserving client care. And I love the growth, because I talk to a lot of law firm owners who are like, I want to grow, but don't necessarily think about the implications of that on their staff and their clients. And so I love that, the way we defined this topic was scaling while preserving client care. So when firms scale fast, I see it. Client care suffers, not all the time, but most of the time. So what are early warning signs that tell you a firm is about to hit that point where client care is going to start tanking?
When they don't have client care. It's like when you're going to scale, you have to decide what 2 or 3 things that you need to be hyper focused on, and decide, if my goal is to grow 5,000% over 2 or 3 years, what is going to stand in the way of that 5,000% growth? Well, getting sued by clients is going to take a big hit. Not
Definitely
having
not
your
a good
clients,
thing.
having your clients not pay you because you're not happy, it's going to get in the way of that. And then what impact that makes on your team. So prior to starting this scaling, we were always growing fast. Went back to the Ritz-Carlton. I was sitting in the lobby of the Ritz-Carlton watching their concierge just walk by. People would have questions, concierge would ask them. And I would just sit, it was in Atlanta, and I was sitting there watching this person do nothing but answer questions. People walk away happy. The number one thing for attorneys and what we get in trouble for is lack of communication. The lack of communication comes because people have questions and we don't provide them answers. So how much, in my mind, I was like, I wonder how much it would cost to implement a client concierge department. Very simple. Somebody to answer the questions that clients would naturally have, And as you're starting to scale, you're going to naturally pull apart your organization and stress people in certain ways. So you might on day one stress your reception and intake team. On day two, you're going to stress your paralegal team. On day three, it's going to be your attorney team. Day four, it's going to be your finance team trying to collect the money, obviously spread out over weeks, not days. But if we had one constant there who built that know, like, and trust relationship with the client, who would answer who's doing what next and when, and then help calendar that for the people that were, otherwise doing things, it would give a constant to the clients. So we gave a constant to the clients. And as we continued to scale and grow, that just stayed right there and never
I love
really
that idea. Yeah, I love that. I mean, that's something that I think about for my firm, but I have not talked to somebody who's actually done it. So I love that you've moved on that. I think that's an amazing, that's just an amazing tip to toss out and say, hey, consider if you're truly on a growth phase, consider making something constant in that entire process for the client. I love that because I know when I have a new client, the questions are, who do I contact with this? And so I try to create like one email, one text number, just try to funnel things. And it's probably not the best, but it is what I have right now. But so I love what you've done with that. That's really good. So I know like you've led, large firms, you've grown your firm immensely. So looking back, what are the growth decisions that produce the greatest improvement in client care, even though you may have actually made the decision? Because you know how you make one decision for one reason, and sometimes there's like a byproduct, sometimes good and sometimes bad. So, but let's focus on a decision. Like you made a decision, you're like, hey, let's go with it. But it ended up making a really good client care, decision in the end as a good result.
One of the things that we did as we were growing, I forget which book I read it in, but it was a debt collection company that they gave their team members awards based on how many positive Google reviews they could get. So we copied that. So I said, what if we could get the people that are trying to get the money, usually somebody that somebody doesn't like, right? It's usually a little consternation there. And we incentivize those team members to get positive Google reviews. And, a little self-brag on our organization, we started getting positive Google reviews about the people collecting the money. But by doing that, we were changing the mindset of those individuals and the client care versus like, hey, you need to pay me now. It's still the same message, right? They understand they need to pay. Even everybody's got a deadbeat client. Even the deadbeat client knows they need to pay you. They're not going to. They know they need to. So just change the conversation a little bit to be nicer or acknowledge what exists. And that made a huge difference. All of a sudden, the complaints that we got, we still get complaints, right? You follow the Pareto principle, 20% are going to cause 80% of your complaints.
80-20.
Yeah.
I'm with you.
But it started just slowing down. And when we slowed down those client complaints, we slowed down the internal processes that needed to handle those complaints, which allowed them to focus on more important work, which allowed them to focus on a better client experience on the front end because they weren't always going back and like, oh, well, they said that I had to pay by the next minute. Well, no, you can pay in the next 10 minutes. We'll give you 10. Yeah. But it cleared up a lot of pathway for people to, focus on the entire client journey.
No, and I like that. And you're right. I've had times where, not necessarily for me, but so back when before COVID and I was, doing everything in person at local clients, a lot of times I would do the billing for law firms, which is, oh my God, like Lord help you guys to do all I stopped doing it. It's too much of a stress for me, but part of that came with collection. And I would do the same thing where initially it was like, hey, when are we going to get paid? And then slowly started changing that conversation to, hey, so I'm looking at your account and I feel like you've mailed a check and we missed it. Can you look, when's the last time you mailed a check? And then that conversation, like that goes so much better. So that's something that I started doing years ago. And randomly it'll happen to me now where somebody won't pay me and I'll, hey, so I was just looking at your account. And like, it just the tone and like the whole change, how you approach the conversation, it really does change the outcome mostly for the better. So I do like that approach for sure. So So what is something that you've changed in your intake process that has had a measurable impact on client satisfaction? Because we talked about your Google reviews, and that would be after client service. So is there something like on your intake? And it probably, I'm assuming it might be related to your concierge, because I really love that idea. I'm not going to lie. So, but is there anything else maybe that you've changed in your intake process that has a measurable impact on client satisfaction?
We thought about why clients are calling, or why the person and more accurately, why the person on the other end of the phone was calling. So you get people that are, you know, opposing counsel that call, judges, courts, things like that. You get people that are already clients calling, and they need quick service to route them to the right direction. So we bifurcated out our intake and our reception team. And our reception team's goal is accurate placement of the person on the other end of the phone. The intake department's goal is to shut up and listen. That their KPI is not to get off the phone, it's actually to stay on the phone. You know, you take that from, what's the shoe company? Zappos. Zappos do the same thing, right? You don't have to reinvent the wheel. Everybody's already done it. You have to reinvent the wheel. Zappos said, you know, stay on the phone until the client's happy. Intake team, we sort of did the same thing, and also used a human to sit there, talk to them, not just go through and, you know, read a checklist like, how old are you? Where do you live? What's your zip code? How much money do you make? You know, the normal thing people want for marketing points, but just have a conversation with them, treat them like humans. And I said, and I always told people, imagine, no offense to doctors, healthcare is a hot button issue. Imagine last time you went to the doctor, just do it 180 degrees different.
Yeah.
That made a big difference.
Yeah, no, and I love that. I know, so I struggle with sales personally, and I did something where I used to have a checklist. I'm like, oh, I need to like before I send somebody a quote, a proposal, I've got to know this, this, and this. And I ended up changing how, instead of making it a list, I make it more of open-ended questions. Tell me what's bothering you. And usually that will tell me a lot of what it will answer my questions. It answers a half my questions. I don't have to ask them. And then I learn so much more. And so just getting somebody to talk, you will learn so much more than what your goal is. Cause I know like people have a habit of not listening because they're thinking in their head of what they're going to say back. And so I love that you've done that, like encourage people to be on the phone. Cause I think you get so much more information as long as they take good notes and pass that along. I think that's a good improvement. I love that. So let's kind of shift gears a little bit. And has there ever been a misstep during a growth phase that taught you an important lesson about maintaining quality of service for your clients?
Every day. There's a misstep every day. I joke, if I can wake up and make one good decision a day, I usually mark that as a win. You know, out of the 100 decisions I might need to make, 1% is pretty good. But, you know, one of the missteps that we made that really directly went to the service of our clients, I was very focused on the depillarization of communication across the organization. Sounds good when you say, right? It almost rhymes.
Right.
But the idea was, you know, trying to be more modern. I wanted to tear down all these barriers that existed and allow somebody, you know, if somebody had a question, they could go directly to this other team member, ask the question, get the answer. It was resulting in horribly inconsistent answers. And these inconsistent answers were proliferating themselves across the organization and causing mass confusion only for the clients to receive. I mean, if they talk to any different person on the operations team, they would have gotten a different answer. And so we repillarized the communication structure. We had to tell the why. Of course, everyone to know, why can't I just reach out to Bob, who I used to talk to all the time? They're right there. I could just ask them, and we, you know, trying to get consistent communication. But once we did that, the clients always got the same answer every single time consistently. And it was this weird, I thought I was doing right, you know, thought I was doing something that was, you know, more modern by getting rid of the silos, but understanding that silos may have existed for a reason.
Yeah. No, and I totally see how that would be a huge improvement, because I would have the inclination of your original path Like, no, let's just like it's better to reach out to just any, to the direct person that you have contact with. But I do see how that can get as you get bigger. You definitely want to route people into the best person to talk to. So yeah, I can definitely see that being, but it's a good thing that you've learned from it. And then you were able to use that. It was a teaching moment, learned from it, regrouped, went into a different direction and, now, can flourish. So I love that, that thank you for being vulnerable. Cause I know sometimes people are like, what mistake? I've never made a mistake. I won't tell you that's not me. I will tell you, if you go back and listen to my first probably 10 episodes of my podcast, I like blubbered on and on about, oh, I did that mistake and that mistake. But I feel like I share because others can be like, oh, maybe I didn't recognize I was making a mistake, but I'm in it. And now's the time I can change my direction. So I definitely love that. So let's talk about hiring for your team. Do you have any specific traits that you think predict whether a new team member is going to uphold the firm's client care standards?
Yes and no. So most of my background that I cherish didn't come from the legal world. It came from the manufacturing world and dealing with people at a different type of industry. And you got to see people that would come to work every single day, do a phenomenal job. And you ask them if they really cared about making steel tubing, they didn't. But they came every single day and did a phenomenal job. So what we noticed, it was people that would be a little bit more honest with you about their motivation for what they were doing. So, if somebody comes like, why are you motivated to be in a call center to answer client complaint calls? Oh, I just love dealing with people. You can't love dealing with getting yelled at for 8 hours a day. It's not possible. And then, somebody else would come in and say, you know what? Yeah, I get it. It's not fun. But every once in a while, you get to help somebody. And I really like that. So for us, it was like, it's that soft realization of the person that just kind of tore down, told you the truth during the interview process to say, I get it. 7 out of 8 of my calls are going to be rough. But the one good one is actually what drives me. That was a little bit more realistic to me than the people who come in and they've done a well-rehearsed job of reading your job description. They can tell you exactly what you want to hear. They're great at, salespeople themselves. And then you dig in 1 inch and you realize that they're like, oh yeah, when was the last time you had to deal with a tough client? All my clients love me. No, they don't. I promise you they don't. Then you're not trying, right? You're not doing
Right.
anything. So we just looked for those monochrome of truth that would probably be marked down by most people as like, ooh, that wasn't the best answer. I look for not the best answer. You get a little bit of honesty there.
Right. Right. No, and I agree. I've had similar experiences and not even with employees, but with clients. I've had some client like now I have my red flags. I'll be on a call with a potential client and if they say certain things, I'm like, oh, this may not be a good fit for me.
Like they already know everything.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Well, I was telling my last person that they were doing this wrong. I'm like, uh-oh.
Yeah.
I think we need to help you find somebody better. So, no, so I agree though. I struggle with hiring. I struggle with interviewing people to be able to find their true intentions, right? So, and it's hard to go through an interview process. And I know back when I had a job and interviewing, and so I get like I've been in those shoes where it's you're being, you're looking for the job and trying to figure out, well, what do I say to get hired? And, do I really want to be here? I don't know. And so it's a dance. And so so I think that I really love what your answer. I think that's a really good it's the inverse. It's looking what's not being said and not on the paper, right? On the resume. So I'm not sure if you follow Guy Sakalakis on LinkedIn. He is an inactive attorney. He owns a digital marketing firm, Attorney Sync. And we touched on this a little bit earlier, but I mentioned Guy because he often talks in LinkedIn. Most of his posts are do what the bots can't do. And so now I'm a person who loves AI. And I will admit, like I've done the deep dive in YouTube of the phone like the phone AI that you sound like you're talking to a real person. And I'm so like enthralled, but yet I'm appalled as a person that I would be talking to an AI bot, right? So, considering that, a firm wants to introduce more automation, where do you see that line between, what is helpful technology? It doesn't have to be necessarily AI, but just technology that gets you efficiency and versus losing a human element that clients expect. Where do you think that line is?
The barometer I use are both my parents. I say, how would my parents feel calling into this service? Because at the end of the day, if you're running a company that you're not proud of, if your parents called, you probably screwed up. Unless you're mining businesses, right? So if you go in and bankrupt businesses out, it's a business. I get it. I know how it works. You might not be proud
Right.
of your parents called it, no doubt.
Right.
But you don't want your automations to go so far because we could get to that point. We actually have the ability right now to use our CRM service that somebody would be able to fill out a form. It would automatically schedule them. It would send them another form that would automatically identify where they need to be. We don't need anybody to talk to anybody if they would give us a credit card. But why would that?
Right.
And,
Exactly.
so for me, that line has been, what would my parents think? And then how am I going to build a know, like, and trust relationship with clients that are willing to hire a robot? Because people are smart. Even the best AI agents we have right now, you get a feeling something's off.
Yeah.
And you think about like, okay, 10, 15 years from now, it might be so good that we don't know something's off. But 10 to 15 years from now, we as humans are going to be so trained to look for that. Our antenna, our hackles are going to raise at things we wouldn't even think of right now. So
Right.
efficiency, amazing. Using an efficiency to cut down on the number of repetitive tasks that we have to do, right? If you have somebody entering the same data into 3 different Excel spreadsheets, that's a place for efficiency. If you have to physically push a button to transfer client data from this software to that software, that's an efficiency point. But if you're trying to use efficiency points to get your clients to sign up faster, your clients don't like you, they like the robot. So what's going to happen when they talk to you? You're going to screw up.
Right. I love that. I mean, I haven't thought about having my parents call. I think that's a great analogy. I mean, or a great way to test what's good and what's bad. I know I had a medical procedure a couple weeks ago, and I got so frustrated because the hospital system was on both ends of high technology and then no technology, because I had to fill out like 1,000 questionnaires before. And then, you have to do the digital check-in. Yes, I confirm I'll be at the appointment tomorrow. And then that morning, yes, I'm going to be there. But then I get there and I had to talk to 4 different people before I even could get to my appointment. And then I'm pissed because I'm like, seriously, I talked to 4 people and they're asking me the same questions I just filled out on 3 different surveys the last couple of days. So now you're pissing me off. So,
And they're still late to my appointment. They're late. They won't guarantee that they'll show up on time.
well, that's just it. And then of all things, oh my gosh. So 4 people I have to talk to before I get to my appointment. The third person in that I have to talk to, I walk into her section. She's talking to a patient in front of me. Now it's 7 a.m. There's only 2 patients, me and this other guy. She says, sir, yeah, you were like 5 minutes late getting here. So we have to have you reschedule your appointment, which he went ballistic. And I'm just sitting there like, oh my God, please just let me survive. And I'm gonna call security. And I'm like, you know why he's pissed? Because it's 7 a.m. and I'm the only other patient in this whole room. And we just had to talk. You're the third person we've had to talk to. So he got here on time, but we had to wait in line. Like because somebody was in front of him. And so, we had to keep waiting in line. I'm like, he's irritated because your process is too slow. You're making me talk to too many people.
It really does. We actually, that's one that we don't use intake forms. The client never fills out an intake form. A human will talk you through it and human will fill it out. But I hate intake forms because if you ever really want to make me mad, have me fill out an intake form and then ask me a question that was on the intake form because I'm going to remember what I wrote. And I would have the same response. And my wife is like, "You're so dumb. You'll go to a dentist office before they drill your tooth and be like, 'Well, I already answered that. Figure it out. Now open your mouth and get your tooth drilled.'" I'm like, "I know it's different."
That is such a Gen X thing. I'm the same way. It's like, dumbass, I just answered that question for you twice already. I'm not doing it again. Oh my gosh. So I've had so much fun today talking to you. I feel like we could just go on for hours and hours, and I want to respect your time. So I just want to have just one last question to wrap up. So I know that you have your podcast, and you've been a guest on other podcasts, and you've had other speaking engagements and stuff. But so is there one question that you wish somebody would ask you as you're being interviewed?
There is one question that I do, and it's always, when did you stop and happy with what you did? Right. So many people get so focused on crossing the 6-figure barrier, the 7-figure barrier, the 8-figure barrier, the 9-figure barrier, and they forget to stop when they hit those and say, you know what, I'm going to take the day off and I'm going to go celebrate however I want to celebrate, because it instantly rolls into the next goal. And for me and our organization, you never hit them at the end of the year, right? It's never going to be, "Oh,
You're
I
perfect.
crossed this barrier at the very last day of the year. Let's go celebrate on New Year's Eve." At some point in the middle of the year, it's going to be like a passing thought, like, "Oh, look, we passed this really cool barrier." But I just wish somebody, what would you have done differently? I probably would have stopped and celebrated each one a little bit more, and taken maybe even a day and say, "Hey, this was awesome. Great. Now back to work tomorrow," and focus in on it, but just appreciate each step a little bit more.
Yeah. And I love that answer. I mean, because I'm just as guilty. So this year, I kind of hit a rough path with my health. And so starting to get down on myself, and, not the best, summer, but I got to a point where I'm like, no, 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 I need a mind shift. And so I now have a journal every morning before I start my day, 10 things I'm grateful for. And not necessarily that I'm going to think, oh, hey, did I hit 1 million? Did I hit 2 million? Like what? Like I'm not necessarily thinking of that, but just being able to say these are the things I'm grateful for, it changes so much. But it's along those lines, like celebrate. You've had this goal, and you might have had it for a year, 2 years, and once you hit it, actually celebrate, enjoy it. Like I love that. That's a really good. I love that. So I think that was a great way to wrap up our episode today. So Charles, thank you so much for being with us today. And like I said in the beginning, we will include contact information. So if you want to get in touch with Charles, definitely, take a listen if you practice family law, or like me, I'm divorced. I could have used your podcast. I've been divorced for a while now. Could have used it a while ago, but because it was a little bit of a rough time. But yeah, I mean, I've just really enjoyed having this conversation, and we'll make sure that if people want to get in touch with you, that the link in the show notes will get people in touch with you. So thank you very much for your time today, Charles.
Thank you. This has been absolutely awesome.
Thank you so much. If you are listening to this podcast episode and you're thinking, I know I need to understand my numbers in my law firm better, but I'm just not ready for CFO support. That's exactly why I created a program called Profit Strong 90. Now, Profit Strong 90 is a structured 90-day course designed specifically for law firm owners who want financial clarity without the overwhelm. So inside this course, you're going to learn how to understand your profit and loss without feeling intimidated, identify where profit is leaking from your firm, improve cash flow predictability, build financial habits that support long-term growth, and make better decisions using real data instead of gut instincts. Now, this isn't theory. It is practical step-by-step guidance built around how law firms actually operate. If you want to feel more confident looking at your numbers, if you want to stop guessing, and if you want to build a stronger financial foundation for your law firm, I can't make this any better of an offer. It's free. Click the link in the show notes below to join Profit Strong 90. This is where clarity starts for you.